It was September 17th, 1978, and the ABC television network was about to launch the most expensive television series of its time. The show? Battlestar Galactica. The story? The remains of the human existence trying to protect its last 12 worlds from destruction by a race of robots called Cylons. Their purpose? To eradicate humanity from the universe. Though Galactica was only broadcast for one season, it has had a lasting impact on its fans throughout the world. Here we are 30 years later, to celebrate the 30th anniversary of that original television broadcast. And the place for this celebration? Aboard the Carnival cruise ship, Paradise. Monday, September 15th, 2008. The Galactica stars and their fans boarded the cruise ship Paradise in Long Beach, California. Once everybody got situated and went through the mandatory safety drills, the convention kicked off with a very special segment.
I mean, really a long time ago, if you probably some of you know, there were not many positive role models for young black kids. I mean, I could try to identify with Tom Mix or Gene Autry or some of those people, but in terms of being black, they had caricatures. I mean, Hollywood was a very racist operation, and the only kind of figures that they showed of black people were humiliating, degrading things, and Africa was sort of the jungle where they have cannibals eating people, and it was all kind of. And I had to grow up with that. It was very difficult for me because we lived in a white neighborhood, and I was the only black kid in the neighborhood. So it was very important for me to be able to have role models. My father was a role model for me, I must say. But I also had, in terms of movies, there was a man named Paul Robeson, whom some of you may know, a great singer, orator, and activist. And my other role model was Duke Ellington. The few times that I was able to see him in some of the movies that they're mentioning here, it was a great sense of pride for me, and it gave me a lot of whatever strength I have.
Besides the presentation by Terry Carter, actress Sarah Rush, who portrayed Flight Corporal Rigel on the show, decided to take a group of our fans on a shopping excursion on Catalina Island. This was truly turning out to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience for many of our Galacticruise fans. We've had the opportunity to experience Terry Carter as a director and producer. Now let's catch some of his insights as an actor on Galactica.
I met a couple of actors who were rather famous. You young people would not know them. I'll tell you who they were. Morris Karnowski, George knows who that is. Morris Karnowski and Howard De Silva. Howard De Silva was a big Broadway star, and we got to talking. They said, Terry, you should study acting. I said, well, no, I'm okay. I'm in law school. And they said, no, you should really think about studying acting. And my rationale was, it might help me in the courtroom. Maybe as a lawyer, it's not bad to have some dramatic training, and that was my rationale. So I started taking classes. Howard De Silva acting school, and he gave me a scholarship, and so I would go to law school in the morning and acting classes in the afternoon and do my law study at night. And things went along kind of nicely there, except that I was becoming even more and more disenchanted with law and more enchanted with acting. And next thing you know, I had an opportunity to get into an off-Broadway show. And I had to make a decision. I dropped out of law school in the second year. And I worked in a play, and it was the Greenwich Mews Theater. I was telling Diane about this place. And the Greenwich Mews Theater was a place in Greenwich Village. It was in the basement of a church synagogue. Synagogue on Saturdays and the church on Sundays. And there was this auditorium of about 300 seats in the basement, and there was a membership of about 100 actors, many of whom went on to become well-known in theater. And they needed somebody to play this role. It was a play by Edward Chatteroff called Decision. And it happened to be the leading role. It was my first acting job. And I got the part. And I remember the first night that I performed. Actually, I didn't tell you this, I was replacing someone. The play was already running. And I was replacing another fellow who had to leave. And I remember I was up there on stage, and I was doing my lines, and it occurred to me, I said, my God, all these people listening to me. And you don't do that when you're acting. You don't worry about what's going on out there, because then I forgot my lines. And when I forgot my lines, what happens in the theater, the stage manager's in the wings, and he doesn't whisper. He says it out loud. He says your line out loud. And it's terribly embarrassing. It's humiliating beyond belief. But it was a great lesson. I mean, he gave me the line. I did the line, and I went through the rest of the play, feeling like, you know what. And I don't think I ever forgot a line from then to now. It was a terrible experience, terribly wonderful experience, I guess you could say. And that was in 1950. That was in 1951. That was in 1951, my God, yes. 1951. And then I did some other stuff. But that doesn't answer your question. Mm-hmm. I think that's it. So I never looked back. And my parents were a little disappointed. I mean, they were quite disappointed. Because you don't want to sound as, am I son the actor? Doesn't sound, doesn't sound like my son the lawyer. You know? But after a while, they softened up, and they were kind of proud of the fact that I was an actor. I mean, I had my Broadway experience, and they were able to come to an opening night. And I remember inviting my family to Sardi's. When you have an opening night on Broadway, particularly if you're in the leading role, they have a night at Sardi's where you come in and everybody applauds, and you sit there and you wait for the papers to come out, and you hope that the reviews are good and all that. And my family had that experience, so it wasn't too bad having a son as an actor.
Okay. Can you tell us about your audition as Boomer for the series?
Oh, sure. Okay. Some of you may know this story. I mean, some of you might have seen my website where I discuss it, but for the sake of the others, I'll tell you the story. One of my problems, as you know, some of you know, I'm older than I look. A few years older. And the problem with that is that you get cast in roles that are younger, and sometimes, being more mature, you look at the character or the script with different eyes. So I found myself being cast in things I thought they weren't worth the paper they were printed on. That happened a lot. The other thing that happens is you are cast sometimes in roles that you don't feel it's not part of your thing. To be plainer than that, I was 50 years old when I was cast in the role of Big Boomer. And now Boomer's supposed to be a young, jaunty guy, I like a Herb Jefferson, And so I was cast in this role, and I was glad to be working again. I had worked for Leslie Stevens and Glenn Larson in McLeod for 7 years, and we had a good relationship, and they wanted to give me another role, and I grabbed it. So they were still in the process of writing the pilot. And you probably all know the story. It went on and on, the writing and the rewriting and the postponing and whatnot. And I went to Venice Beach one day with my family, I hadn't been on roller skates for a long time, but that was not relevant. We rented some shoe skates, and my daughter, who was then, I think she was 6 years old. She was 6.5, and my son was 9, and my wife, and we went roller skating. Everything was fine, And after roller skating, we wanted to go back to get given the shoes, and we're walking on Venice Beach, and Venice Beach, the sidewalk there at that time was in bad shape. Had lots of holes and ruts and stuff like that. I said, Melinda, be careful, look out for the holes. And at that moment, a hole reached up and grabbed my shoe skate and wouldn't let go.
Yeah.
And I fell over, and my foot stayed in the same place. It was like a pretzel. And it was the most excruciating experience I ever had in life. I mean, I was screaming and moaning, and I had to be carried to the car, and they took me to the ambulance and the whole thing. We gave the shoes back, of course. But my foot, my leg, ended up in a cast. And my first concern was, of course, the pain. But the very second concern was my job. As an actor, you got to be there when they call you, right? So I called my agent, Jack Fields, at the time, and I told him what happened, and he said, "Oh my God!" But of course, they hadn't put the call out yet. We didn't know when they were going to start. He said, "Well, let's just play it by ear." But he says, "I got to tell you, we conspired, he and I, that I had not told him to take him off the hook, because the relationship of an agent with producers is a lot different, And he needed to be protected. Otherwise, he would have to call them right then. So we waited, and finally we got the call for my appearance as an actor, on the set. And he called me. He says, "Terry, they called," and he said, "What's your situation?" I said, "Well, I'm in a walking cast, but I'm in a cast, He said, "I'm going to have to tell them." So he called them, and he said, "You know what? I just found out that Terry Carter had broke his leg. They hit the roof. I mean, Leslie hit the roof, and of course, Glenn, why didn't you tell us?" He said, "Well, I didn't know. I just found out." He's a good actor. He was a good actor, too. So what happened is I lost the job, and I'm sitting there, oh, Christ, I lost the job. You don't want to lose a job. That's a dumb way to lose the job. And so what they did, they immediately put out a call for an actor to play the part of Boomer. And the usual thing, and people came in, and one of the guys that came in was a guy named Herb Jefferson, and Herb had been cast in another show. I wish he were here to tell you the story himself, but he was already contracted to be in some other show. I don't know what it was. Sorry, I won't speculate. They made him resign from that show in order to audition for this part. That's what they do in Hollywood. That's what they do. You cannot audition for something if you are not free. So I guess there were reasons for that. So they don't have to get into negotiation with the other producer or whatever it is. He had to quit that other job before he even had the possibility of being considered for this job. He got the part, as we all know, happily for him and happily for the show. So Herb Jefferson was Lieutenant Boomer, and Terry Carter was unemployed. So one day, my agent calls me. He says, "Terry, they want to know, Glenn wants to know, would you consider the part of Colonel Ty?" And the very idea that I was being called was wonderful. I said, "Well, let me take a look at the script." And I read the script, and I said, oh, not bad. The wonderful thing about this role was something that I felt. It felt like me, and the other one, very frankly, did not. But I would have done my best, but I frankly would not have done as good a job as Kirk did. And here was a role that just felt the shoes fit, No, I shouldn't talk about shoes. The coat fit. So I got the part of Colonel Ty. And, we have an expression in this business, break a leg, and now I know it.
And now one of my favorite segments of the show. The beautiful Sarah Rush joins us. to tell us about some of her fondest memories on the set of Galactica and working with her co-stars.
What did your parents say when you wanted to go to Penn State and study acting?
Well, because that's a good question. Because I was the co-queen, I got a full scholarship to Penn State University. So they really couldn't complain too much. You know? But my dad's cousin had been James Dean, the actor. And so my dad did not want me to be an actor. And my mother was always very supportive, but dad never really was. And I went to Penn State and I did a 5-year program in 4 years, and I was the first person to get a Bachelor of Fine Arts because I really wanted to get that. And my dad would say, keep typing. You know, and there are a lot of family members out there. I think our parents, when you're in the arts, your family they're just afraid for you because they think, oh no, you know, what if you get to be 50 and you're struggling? And hey, he kind of had a point. You should have kept typing. But anyway, so they were a little nervous, but Mom was very supportive.
Okay. How old were you when you got your first gig?
Well, I did, when I was 14 and 15, I kept calling a summer theater in Pittsburgh saying, when can I work? I want to be an apprentice. And the owner of the theater kept saying, call me when you're 16. And I thought that was the magic number. And now I realized that was because I could drive. And you had to drive yourself back and forth. So I started apprenticing at this theater. And then I went to college and I got my first professional job, I think my sophomore year. And I did a production of Elma Duckworth, Bus Stop. And I played Elma Duckworth. And oh, Terry, I love that you know Morris Karnofsky. Oh. Because a girlfriend of mine did a play with him. And everybody was so terrified of him. And one night he said, tonight I do not like this play. And everybody was like, ah! So anyway, and I worked with Ed Binns when I did, and I don't know if you know Ed Binns, but E.G. Marshall and Ed Binns were both just terrific actors, and they both kind of became my pals, and it wasn't anything inappropriate. They were just actors who liked actors, and we had a lot of fun together. So anyway, what'd you ask?
Where you got your first gig?
Oh yeah, so I did that with Ed Binns, and I did a production of Elma Duckworth. He bust off, and I played Elma Duckworth at Summer Stock in Pennsylvania.
Okay. You were one of the last contract players at university.
Yes.
You signed a 3.5-year contract.
Yes.
Did you look at it as your big break, or did it tie you down?
No, my gosh, I was so grateful. What happened was I'd gone to Penn State, graduated. I got this $2,000 scholarship from Samuel Galoo, who'd written Give 'Em Hell Harry. And he gave me a scholarship. So I took that $2,000 and moved to New York. And I got a job as a waitress at Beefsteak Charlie's. And the girls that worked there were really tough. And I wasn't tough yet, and I'm still waiting to get tough. But these girls are tough. And as a matter of fact, what they would call me Joe, Beth, Amy. Do you know why they call me that? Little Women, you know, they would make something like I was Little Women. And so 2 weeks into that job, the Board of Health closed it down for the day. And I had an audition for Universal Studios, and I got the job, and to be a contract player. And I came back the next day to say, you know, I'm not going to be a waitress here anymore. And the girls just looked at me like they were going to murder me because they were all actors. But at any rate, so I was so grateful. And I got, you know, as a Universal contract player, I got, I think it was $350 a week. And then it went up to about $700 a week. And when you got a job, I mean, basically what you had to do was you had to earn enough money. You had to earn more money than they were paying you to keep you. And I would just go to Universal, and I was very green. I was 21. And I would roller skate all over the back lot, and I would just pop in. And one of the contract players was David Mathau, whose father was Walter Mathau. And so Walter was making a movie, and we just go and have fun. And I mean, it was just incredible. And I was paid, and so that was great.
Okay.
That afternoon, the fans had a chance to sit down with musical composer Stu Phillips. Stu was behind a piano at one of the piano bars aboard the Paradise and gave the fans an opportunity to get his insights on what it's like to put together a musical score for a show like Galactica. Let's listen in.
All right, if you remember that picture of Glenn Lawson, I think I have in the book where he's looking up at me and I'm conducting and he's kind of like, my son, So, no, he really, when he heard it with the orchestra, he was extremely pleased with it. And he was happy for two reasons, because he liked it, and he was happy because he wasn't going to be made a fool of, because he kept insisting that I do the score and not some other composer, that Universal was trying to, push on him. So he was happy that he was going to be he figured, hey, nobody's going to like this, So that made him happy that he was right in his fight and that he liked what it was. So, very good. So does this look like our gang here, or, I know Beth said she was coming, but I don't trust her. What?
She's out looking for her mother.
Oh, she is?
Yeah.
All right, why don't I give her a minute or two? Like I said, I hate going through this twice. Although I guess I could. There's no second performance.
I have a question.
Yeah, go.
Yeah. Did you have that same 110 piece
No.
orchestra week to week?
No. The orchestra varied from probably around 60 or 55 or 60 to 110. Actually, I think just the Wednesday and Thursday morning might have been the only time I had that big. Otherwise, from that, because you don't need that many musicians for every cue that you play. I mean, some of them are like Cassiopeia's theme is basically 30 pieces or something. It wasn't that. So you don't have a whole bunch of guys sitting around and getting paid to do nothing. So you have to map out all these sessions so that you don't do things like that. No, I didn't have it for the whole, probably for a day and a half. I had the big orchestra. Because we had all the battle sequences were the big orchestra, the main title, the exploration. There was quite enough music there to cover that. Yes, sir.
As the series went on, I know that the series it was rushed. It seemed like everyone had very short lead times from writing it to practicing it, doing the effects. How much time did you have to actually write the music and score it? I imagine as you were.
Not a lot. What day did Galactica was on? What, a Saturday? Was it
Sunday.
Sunday. Sunday night. Was it Sunday?
Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday night. Okay. I generally scored on Fridays for the show that went on Sunday. And while I was scoring, they were dubbing. And when I got done with the cue, it immediately went down to get transferred and sent over to the stage. And sometimes they would say to me, they're doing reel 3, Stu, can you do all the music on 3 before, you go to other things? And that would always screw things up because I always figured my orchestra, well, I'd have so many and then I'd let these guys go. And then so I ended up with people sitting doing nothing because they wanted reel 3 down in dubbing, So it was very hectic. And generally, the Friday before I scored, sometimes I scored Thursday, but I do remember a few Fridays where they were dubbing and I was scoring at the same time. Generally, what would happen is Friday morning, we would have what they called a screening, post-production screening. And because the lead time was so short, everybody was there, the Foley people, the sound effects people, the writer, the film editors, writers, everybody was there, all doing their job together at the same time, whereas generally you like to have separate screenings for these things so that the sound effects guy isn't interrupting while the music thing's going. It's a little hectic. So we would look at this on a Friday morning, and then after I saw it, I would go with my music editor with the music reels, which were generally black and white, in the worst possible piece of old stock that Universal could find. I mean, it was like watching a Gene Autry Western that hadn't been fixed up yet, hadn't been up. It was terrible. And we would look at that on the Moviola, and I'd go through the whole thing again, and we would re-spot all the things we decided where to spot music and how long to go. We would do it again. And then I would leave, and he would send me by messenger a breakdown sheet, and the breakdown sheet had all the music we had decided on and how long it was, so I could now plan on what kind of an orchestra I thought I needed, so that I could call the contractor, because a week's notice to get the best musicians is very short. So I would have to call her even before I wrote a note of music. I'd have to let her know what orchestra was in my mind, what kind of orchestra, the makeup of the orchestra, and then, if I was lucky, Saturday morning, the music editor would come in, and he would start to break down individual cues for my scoring. And I would get a messenger maybe in the middle of the afternoon, late afternoon, with maybe half a dozen, 10 cues or something, all done. And I would start writing at that particular point, which would have been Saturday. Generally, sometimes I never got the reels I wanted to get because they would take reels back from the music editor because they say, this reel's no good anymore, Glenn made changes, so they take it away from him. So he couldn't do anything with it, and then they send him a new one. So it got pretty hectic, and then of course Universal didn't want to pay Sunday overtime to the music editor, so they say, we don't want him working on Sunday, and I say, well, there's no way I can make the session on Thursday if he can't give me sheets on Sunday. And there was big arguments for a while, and then they finally gave in and said, okay, whatever you say, go ahead, do it, because Glenn's over budget anyway, so he'll be a little further over budget, So by Sunday, with luck, I generally had all my little breakdown sheets with all the music cues I was going to write. And I would have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And as I said, if we did a Thursday afternoon session, then I'd have to be ready then. If we had Friday, then I'd have an extra day. So basically, we're talking 6 days, but actually 4.5 days where I actually physically had the stuff to do. And I never had any videotapes sent over to my place that I could look at or anything else. And my personal philosophy was that after looking at it at the screening and looking at it on the Moviola, whatever was in my mind that I could recall from looking at the sheets that said Adama does this, Apollo does this, it would come back to me. And that basically what I remembered in my mind was probably better than what was actually on the screen, But that's how I approached it. Everything I did, I always approached as though I was, writing Gone with the Wind. In other words, if I was doing Hell's Angels on Wheels, it was like I wasn't going to approach it that I was doing that. I was doing a better movie. So I visualize everything much better than it actually was on the screen.
Next up was Emmy Award-winning writer Terrence McDonald. Terrence was the story editor and writer for Battlestar Galactica. Terrence kept the fans entranced with his stories about what it was like to write for the show, as well as some of the things going on behind the scenes.
Well, when I was a kid, and even up through college, writing never even crossed my mind as a career. I wanted to be a veterinarian from the time I was in high school up through my first year in college, because I love animals. And my grades went right in the toilet. First year, right in the toilet. Because I wanted to play. And all during high school, I was always voted like the class clown, and I was that far from being suspended from fooling around. And even the Jesuits couldn't control the free spirit that was here. And so when I got into college, between my freshman and sophomore year, I was dating a girl who had a cabin out on the Vermilion River, which is off of Lake Erie in Ohio. And I still remember the moment, because there are certain moments that just transcend everything else in your life. And we were sitting on the dock. She had this little canoe, and some guy came along, and I was talking to her. And he just stopped and he says, "Boy, you have a nice voice. Are you on the radio?" And I said, "No." And I kept thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And I realized that the school that I was going to had one of the best radio TV departments in the country. So when I got back to school, I switched into radio and television, where I wrote and produced and directed all these comedy shows. And I was also a disc jockey. And when I came out to Los Angeles, I just wanted to get my foot in the door, and I wanted to be a director, where most directors are camera pointers, because there's not enough time to really rehearse. Well, you've just got to be able to block the shot and do it, rather than just, here's the emotion that I want coming out here. No, there's no time for that. And so writing was something that I could always just do. And so when I came out to Los Angeles, I got a job almost immediately writing, because I submitted like 35 pages of material the day after I was told I had an interview, and they said, "Give me some ideas on what you do tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock." So I was up all night and just cranked, and I got hired, and I've been writing ever since. So it was just, as a kid, I watched so much TV and saw so many movies that it was just kind of absorbed. Subconsciously, you kind of know what to do or where to take a story or something like that. And, it's so much fun doing that, because all you do is make shit up all the time. What is this? What is this? What about this? What about this? What about this? And so pretty soon things kind of, ultimately come together, and that's how a script generally takes its shape. So I've been preparing for that job my whole life without even knowing. But you don't know that until you look back on it.
Okay. What science fiction influences did you have growing up?
Not a lot. The only science fiction movies were the bad ones in the 1950s, with the exception of The Day the Earth Stood Still maybe. But I read Bradbury and Richard Matheson, who I liked a lot, and who I met many times since then. And Fritz Lieber, who was another sci-fi writer. So there was a little bit of that, but we were always playing. When we go out, to play, we were either today we were going to play pirates, or we were going to be, we were going to be in outer space, or we were going to be this or that. I'm sure everybody goes through those stages. We have better storylines there.
You ended up working with Jim Carlson, writing an episode of The $6 Million Man.
Yeah.
Then again on the Bionic Woman.
Yep.
How is it that two people write together?
Jim and I met. I had gotten my foot in the door, and I was doing. I told some people this story. I had been doing game shows when I first got my foot in the door in the business in Los Angeles, and I met Jim at a run-through of a game show that never went on the air. And what a run-through is it's the actual game that you stand up in an office, and you have a host, and you got people who don't know the answers to the questions, and you play it and see if there's flaws in it. Yes, over here.
Back when television first started, 1949 through 55, it seemed like every network had at least one space show with Tom Corbett, Space Cadet, and Rocky Jones, Space Ranger, and Space Patrol. Why is it that the entertainment industry today is so heavily biased against space adventure fiction?
Can we just hold that till the end? Would that be okay?
If you wish.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll take questions after.
Yeah. But anyway, let me go back to Jim. And I met him in a run-through, and I don't remember who spoke to who first, but we both started laughing. He had originally worked for Roland Martin's Laugh-In, and he was a comedy writer. He worked for Bob Hope and some of these other ones. Jim was much older than I was. And but while I was doing this game show and talk about serendipity, where you're not expecting something to happen and it happens, one of the guys that I was working with on this particular game show, his name is Ken Johnson, who you may know. Ken Johnson created Bionic Woman, he created V, Alien Nation. Well, Ken was working with me on the show, and at the time he was writing $6 Million Man. This one day he came in and he said, I think they're going to offer me the producership of the show. But I didn't even blink, and I didn't even waste, there wasn't even a heartbeat. And I said, well, if you get the job, can I pitch stories to you? And he said, sure. So he gets the job, and I don't know what to do now. I don't know. He goes, I don't know how to do this. But I knew Jim. I met him like 8 months before, so I called him. And I said, do you remember me? And he says, oh, yeah, of course, and blah, blah, blah. And I told him about the situation and would be interested in possibly teaming up to see if we could do something. And he said, sure. So we got together, and we hammered out a bunch of stories, and we went in, and we sold the first one. And before we were done with the first one, they handed us another one. And then the Bionic Woman was starting up, and they handed us another one. Pretty soon, all of a sudden, we were a team. So it just kind of stumbled into that. So when Jim and I would work, after we would work out the whole outline, because we outlined everything, you cannot do this stuff without working from an outline. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, and if there's a teaser or a tag, teaser's that opening part that gets you hooked, tag is that little thing at the end that's just like a little button on everything. He would go off and write the first 2 acts, and I would write the last 2 acts. And then we would get together and we would edit it. And his style was a little bit different than my style. So we would edit it so it kind of all fit. And then we would turn it in. We do that in a week. We do that in 5 days. So that's generally how we did it consistently because it seemed to work for us.
Okay. Did you and Jim ever have arguments over a way a story was written?
We were a team for 20 years, and maybe 3 times we had a fight over a particular plot point or where something should go. And that lasted like 5 minutes. And then we threw out his idea and we threw out my idea, and whatever idea we did come up with was better than either of those other 2. So it was a waste of energy. Yeah.
Unfortunately, Jim died less than a year ago from heart problems.
Yes.
How did you find out?
Jim was one of my best friends my whole life. And Jim had been retired since 1994. He had moved to Colorado. And I was friends with his kids. They grew up with me. And I was working on a show for Game Show Network, and I got a phone call from one of his sons who said that he had had a heart attack and was in the hospital. And so I had just seen him about 9 months before, because he would come out. I'd see him every year almost. And so I talked to him in the hospital after he got his strength back. And I even talked to him when he was at home. And a couple of days later, another phone call, and everything that they had tried to do at the hospital, even though he was home now, it didn't work. And he was gone. So I miss him every day, and I think about him a lot. And a hell of a writer and a hell of a good guy. So any of you who know him from previous cons know that. So
you said he would have loved to.
Oh, he was loved to have been here.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Galactica. You said that after 2 episodes of Galactica had aired, Don Belisario asked you to do a first act of a Patton and Space Cadet.
Yeah.
And he liked it so much that he wanted you to write another act and ended up throwing it away.
Yeah. Because of our success on $6 Million Man and Bionic Woman, and an ex-girlfriend who worked at ABC who recommended us for the job, we got the call from Don, and he said, well, we're looking for story editors. He said, we're thinking about doing an episode of Patton in Space. Could you go home and write Act 1? And we said, well, what's the story? He says, I don't know. Come up We got patented space. That's what we want. So he says, give it to me in the morning.
No pressure.
So we went home and we pounded it out and we turned it in the next morning. And we put it on his desk and he kind of looks through it, and he says, okay, he says, go home and give me Act 2.
No.
And give it to me in the morning. And I'm thinking, oh, this isn't bad, because we generally knock out a script in a week. So this is just a little bit faster. And so by Friday we'll have the whole thing done and we'll be paid. And so we turned in Act 2. And the next thing we hear, number one, we've been hired, because I went out to Jim's house because I figured we were going to start Act 3. And I got out of his house and he's standing there with a glass of wine and he says, welcome, story editor. And I said, no way. He says, yeah, we've been hired. So what happened in the meantime was they liked the first 2 acts so much, they sent it to Anne Lockhart, who had not been hired for the show yet. And she liked the script so much that she signed on to do the series. I didn't find that out until a few years ago. So we come in and we hear that, well, Glenn read the first 2 acts, but he wants to do a 2-parter. So we're going to throw your script out, and we're going to let him do that script. But you'll have other scripts to write, which we certainly did. And so I still have those 2 acts at home of the show. I don't remember what the final 2 acts will have been. That's disappeared long ago. But Commander Kane was called Jedediah. I remember that because Glenn was doing all his biblical references. I think we call Sheba Sheba. But that's the story about that. Glenn turned it into the obviously the living legend. Yes.
Okay. You were story editor at that point.
Yes.
Do you know what they didn't have one prior to that? Do you know how they worked without a story editor previously?
Well, originally, from what I've been told, this was going to be either a mini series or just a few episodes, and then maybe a mid-season replacement, something like that. And all of a sudden, they decided, no, we need this to be a series. And so Glenn was writing and Don Belisario was writing, but they couldn't crank them out fast enough. They needed somebody else. So we were brought in as that third wheel to write another episode while they were, and so that 3-week lag time helped everybody. We would just, jump over each other. So that's how that worked.
As story editor, can you tell us what your job consisted of, what a work week would have been like?
Right. Now, story editor then is the equivalent of supervising producer today. And what we would do, unfortunately, we only did this a couple of times, is normal on other shows when I've been story editor. The writers come to us, and they would pitch their stories or their ideas. And then we would find one that we liked, or we said, no, not that one, not that one, not that one. And on a lot of shows, I would have to take, like on this show, if somebody pitched something to me, I'd have to take it to Don Belisario for approval. On other shows, I've just said, no, that's a good story, do that one. And then when the script is turned in, I would rewrite it if I had to rewrite it. If I thought that it didn't work here, or I didn't like the dialogue here, or whatever, it was a job to rewrite it and make it work. Which is why I went into Glenn's office that day and said, I have notes on your script, and then all hell broke loose. So that was my job.
Okay. You talked before about some of the time constraints that you were under and the few number of hours that you wrote some of the scripts.
Murder on the Rising Star. Murder on the Rising Star, is that it? Yeah. We had turned in a bunch of storylines to Glenn, and we're waiting for him to just give us an approval. And he's on the beach in Hawaii, and he's writing his script, and all of a sudden we get a phone call, 4:30 on Wednesday afternoon. And we write Murder on the Rising Star. Well, we really didn't have a story. We just had this log line. And it had to be in Mimeo on Friday morning at 7 o'clock. So we didn't go home for 36, that was written in 36 hours. And it was basically what came right out of the typewriter. We didn't have time for a rewrite. So, and I know some people like that episode a lot, and it's like, oh my God. All I remember is the agony of doing that. You know, we had no idea what we had. We were both hallucinating practically from lack of sleep. So.
Okay. You didn't have a Galactica Bible to work from. How did you keep your terminology?
That's the whole Glenn Larson story. Was everybody here for that?
Yeah.
That day? I had gone through all the scripts that were on my desk, and I kept seeing, secton, centon, and all these things and he was using them interchangeably. So I just put together a little dictionary thing. And I just wanted, when I went into Glenn's office to say I have notes on your script, it was simply for consistency. So from one show to the next, things would make sense. It would be called this. Well, he didn't want to listen to that. All he heard was, I have notes on your script. But no, and that was the last we ever heard of it, and that's why things are still inconsistent on a lot of shows. But at least on the 3 that we did, they're consistent. So.
Because the writing was rushed, do you feel like you could have done a better job with them if you had been given more time?
On that particular script, yeah, because we had an awful lot of time. We could have knocked out another script. No, I mean, we were used to writing things in a week, so it was no big deal. Most writers get 2 weeks to do it, but we always felt that the quicker we can turn it around, the quicker they'll give us another. So that's the way we're doing.
How was your writing affected or constrained that Galactica was shown during Family Hour using standards and practices?
Well, there was a bit of network interference on this. There's an episode called Take the Celestra that we wrote. And we had Starbuck and Apollo are going over to the Celestra in this ship. And when they get over there, there's a big firefight in the landing bay because there's a mutiny taking place on the Celestra. And so they get into the firefight. Okay, now you cut back to Galactica. I don't remember what was going on back there, but we had another story going on back there. And now we cut back to the Celestra, and the firefight is still going on. And then we cut back again, and every time we cut back, it was this same firefight. Well, ABC had this rule that we could only do 4 or 6, I forget what the number was, incidents of violence per hour, okay? And they were claiming that every time we cut back to the same firefight, it was a new act of violence. And we kept saying, no, it's the same firefight. It's the same act of violence. And they said, no. So finally, we were so pissed off, we called we had this one woman, it's our show. We called the boss, and we said, here's the situation, and here's what's happening, and she's not understanding this. And he said, fine, no worries. So we got a little bit more incidents of violence into that than we did before. But, I mean, we could, the show that you have now, we couldn't in no way do back then. So we did have those constraints. And I've told this story to a few people here. And I brought the script that nobody has ever seen. The original Fire in Space episode. The ending, if you're familiar with it, has Starbuck and Apollo going out on the hull to blow a big hole in it so the vacuum of space will come in and smother the fire. At the beginning, we have a Cylon suicide attack that comes in and then it sets the Galactica on fire. Well, the ending that you've seen has Starbuck and Apollo, they go out on the hull and they plant these charges to blow a hole in it, and coincidentally, as they're getting back in, this rung on the hull comes loose. And the one goes drifting off into space, and the other one is right over the explosion. And the other one has to launch himself off into space and get him out of the way. And then how Sheba ever picked him up in that Viper is beyond me. Okay, but somehow well, the original ending was not that. The original ending of the show was they go out on the hull to plant the charges, and the Cylons come back in a suicide attack. Just exactly like before. One of them is getting through. So not only are they out on the hull trying to plant the charges, they're dodging laser fire, they're watching everything go on, and one Cylon gets through and it's coming right at them. And they have to time the explosion and get out of the way, so when that explosion goes off, it completely evaporates the Cylon. Really a cool ending, and the way it should have been done. And I'll tell you about the tag in a second. Well, ABC in their infinite wisdom, these are non-writers telling creative people what to do. And so we don't like that ending. And I'm like, I'm nuts! Are you crazy? That's a great ending. No, it's repetitive. So what do you mean it's repetitive? I said, well, you had a Cylon attack at the beginning, and now you're having another Cylon attack now. I said, don't you get it? The fact that we know what they can do, we know what they're coming to do. No, we don't like it. You're gonna have to change it. And we fought them for 3 weeks, and finally we just ended it. And then the tag, if you remember that stupid tag, they've got Adama in bed, and they got the singed Daggett laying next to him. I burst out laughing in the screening room when I saw that. It was asinine. And what happened in our episode was at the very, very end of the episode, before that tag, Apollo doesn't know if Boxy's dead or not. He thinks he's dead. So that tag is this warm reunion for everybody, and it brings the whole thing together. So that whole part of it was completely different. It's a typical example of what we had to deal with the number interference.
Okay.
So.
You said that you were on set during filming sometimes?
Sometimes.
And you really enjoyed watching filming?
Well, the one I remember specifically going down for was the Fire in Space episode, because there were so many stunts. I remember all the actors and the crew were in a big semicircle around the bridge when the big explosions take place. And they had stunt guys in costume over here by where the star field was shown on the screen. And they had little tiny trampolines in place. And so at the given moment, action, the guys would hit those trampolines and then go flying over everything. And then they drop plastic stuff from the ceiling that looked like it was debris from the bridge. And then there was a big round of applause from everybody, and then they go do it again. There was also a big map that they had on the other side of the bridge that was all wired in the back, and that was shattered. So there were all these cool things, and then when they were out on the hull, that was a projection. They just had a couple of boxes on a huge empty stage, and they had a projection in the camera of the hull, and they had, I think it was Dirk and Richard, wired. And they were flying it, and I remember they were going out of control and just spinning because they had to get the hang of all. And that was where the Daggett left his shoes on the floor. The rafters. The other Daggett story that I was telling somebody was Evie, the chimp, had its own pet. It had this little dog. It's called a skipper key. I don't know if you know what they are. They're like Australian dogs, and they're cute. They don't have a tail, just this little butt. And they're sort of short hair. And the chimp would walk it around on a leash. And they had a birthday party for Noah Hathaway this one day, and they gave Evie a piece of birthday cake. And the owner of Evie said, "Evie, you share that birthday cake with Skipper." And Evie looked up at him and looked down at the dog and took the entire cake and dropped the birthday cake. Fantastic. Yeah.
While you were there during filming, did any of the directors need rewrites during shooting?
No. Generally, when we would write a script, and it's always been that way in my career for one reason or another. I've hardly had any notes. Very rarely do I have to make major adjustments in it. But I do have just talking about the directors, one of my first jobs in the business in Los Angeles, I worked in the mailroom at ABC. And another guy who worked in the mailroom at ABC, his name was Rod Holcomb. And he and I were really good friends. And we would hang out together, and I would hop on his motorcycle. We'd go out to Westwood and we'd see foreign films. He loved Ingmar Bergman, and we'd see the Woody Allen films. We'd talk about them, and we loved film. And I said, he wanted to be a director, and I wanted to write. And we often said, wouldn't it be cool if someday, you got to direct something that I wrote? And it happened on Order on the Rising Star. He directed the episode. So, it's just very cool. Very cool.
Were there any directors that shot it in such a way that you thought, I didn't intend it to come out like this at all?
Well, as a writer, we see the movie first in our head when we write it. So, no matter what they do, it's wrong. It's not just wrong. It's not what you saw, because you wrote it. There's certain moments you go, oh, that was great. That really worked a lot better than I thought it was going to work. I didn't have any real problems with it. I thought when they fired the Boraton at the camera, I thought it looked lame, but it looked cartoony. But they were being rushed, so it's just nitpicky stuff.
Okay.
Well, the good times continued with actor Danny Miller, who took the opportunity to talk about his guest star appearances on Galactica as the clone Sir 5-9. Denny also gave the fans a chance to listen to some of his other experiences as an actor and a writer. Let's listen.
Having a good cruise?
Yes, I've been sleeping a lot. And I don't drink, so I'm developed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about the happy accident that got you involved in acting.
Yes, I had come back from the Army and went to UCLA because I could bounce a ball. And they get the jobs in the summertime, mainly physical jobs. Mine was working for Beacon's Family Storage, moving furniture. And they want them to keep in shape and want to know where they are. If they're not getting themselves too out of line. And I was working on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood, taking office furniture out of a warehouse and putting it on our truck, and then we were going to take it to an office. And I was pushing a chair down the sidewalk, and I heard somebody over my shoulder yell, hey you, come here and let me see your hairline. I knew there were a lot of kooks in Hollywood. And I figured I'd bump into one. So I turned around, but some guy was hanging out of his window with Carnival gear, under the little cars anyway. He said, yeah, you. So I walked over and I pulled my hair back and I said, is that okay? And I turned around to go when I hear over my shoulder again, here's my card, give me a call. I turned around and I grabbed the card and he drove off. And this says Robert Razon, theatrical agent. I put the chair in the truck and went back to the warehouse. And my boss says, where the hell have you been? I said, he says, I don't want to hear about it. Just put the furniture on the truck. And away we went, and we went to a theatrical agent. This has never happened before or since. And 3 of the 5 agents in that office gave me their cards. So I ended up with 4, actually 5, because some guy on the sidewalk saw the first guy give me. Anyway, I went home and I put the cards in my sock drawer and forgot about them. Because I was a physical education major at UCLA and I was going to coach basketball or football or some sport at the high school level, I suppose. And the guy who gave us our jobs the next day in the morning at Beacons met me and said, "There's a guy called you," and he gave me a piece of paper with a phone number, and I wadded up, threw it away, and the same thing happened the next day. And the third day, this guy said, "If you don't call this guy and get him off my back, you're fired." So I needed the job. I called this guy, and he said, "Come on over, you ever think of being an actor?" And I said, "No." He said, "Come on over and we'll read a script together." And we did, and he said, "Thank you," and I went home, and now he had my phone number, and I was still living with my parents, and I got a phone call from him, went on one interview, and got a screen test. It's one of those difficult ones. They call them personality tests. They see if you freeze in front of the camera. They want to know how your voice records, and let's see your left profile. No, your other left. I was nervous, but I got a contract, a 7-year contract. They asked me tough questions like, "How old are you?" and "What are you doing?" and things like that. Very, very simple screen test. My biggest problem was going back to the fraternity house in UCLA and explaining to my brothers there that were in theater arts. I had a 7-year contract, and I was still taking theater arts, and I volunteered to let him have my Beacons uniform and stand in the corner of Sunset. And only 2 out of 3 of them hit me.
Can you tell us about Tarzan?
Tarzan was because I was just happened to be back in those days. George, remember when they had stables at this major studios and they would pay you $1.35? I know I got less than the elephant during shooting of Tarzan. Anyway, I was there with John Gavin and John Saxon and St. John and all those folks, and we were being paid weekly salaries for 40 weeks of the year, and they would loan us out to do parts. And MGM had bought my contract before it became active at Review Studios. Now it was with Gene Jones and Martha Heyer and people like that I never really heard of before, but I didn't hear, those names didn't come up in the gym much. And so I was a contract player, and you pretty much do what they say you do. And they said, "Well, you're going to test you for Tarzan." I said, "I have blonde hair." It didn't seem to bother him. Bill Smith, the man who was on the streets of Laredo and Laramie and all those things, and was very good. He speaks very good Russian, along with 3 or 4 other languages, so you can see him pass as a Russian general or something. I recommended Bill because we worked out at the same gym. He had a better build than I did. He was cold black hair. He seemed to matter. In the screen test, which was rather ludicrous, I come out of the jungle soaking wet in a loincloth and sit down on a log and recite the 23rd Psalm. It's a jam. And they said, "Yes, we're going to make this Tarzan very, very educated and very he's a bright guy." In the whole film, I didn't say as many words as the 23rd Psalm. I found out that Ungala can mean stop, go, turn left, here comes the elephant. Zebra has to go to the bathroom. Just absolutely ludicrous though. And if you ever want to read about that, there's a guy named Gabe, Gabe Essoe, who wrote a book called Tarzans of the Movies, and I'm under the title headed Tarzan the Worst. Gabe is a friend of mine. He said, "It wasn't you, it was the movie," and I must agree that They had a very low budget, so they took King Solomon Mines footage. They must have had a mile or two of it, and they tinted the scenes that they were shooting in Tarzan idea, Tarzan the Ape Man, which was incidentally a remake of the Johnny Weissmuller one. And then 20 years later, Derek made it, and I was the second worst Tarzan. After she and John got through kind of ruining that episode of it.
Okay. Do you remember how you got the role of Sir 5'9" on Battlestar Galactica?
I think mainly because I had a beard, and that's happened quite a few times. It happened, my agent called, about 16 or 17 years ago and said they're looking for a new spokesman for Corpus Fishermen, and I've been working on Westerns in Canada. I had worked on their version of Lonesome Dove. It was an hour episodic genre there, and a sequel to the Duval one. And then I'd worked on some other Westerns up there, and my beard and wrinkles were working for me, so I didn't want to cut it. And they want clean shaven, because all of their product packages had clean shaven fishermen. And I said, I won't shave it because I'm really getting a lot of work. And so I showed up and seen 600 or 700 guys in New York and LA. And I got called back 5 times, and they changed the packaging. Got to be the spokesman for 14 years. So my ex-wife says I have a horseshoe hidden in some orifice of my body.
Did you know in advance when you got the part that they were going to make 20 copies of you?
I must have, but I didn't know how many, really. I did know that they sent me to Electric Light and whatever, what are those, that company that does the landing of the spaceships.
Industrial Link.
That's the place. And they sent Britt Eklund and I both over there to give him a face mold. And I went in, jumpy jolly, and had a good time until they stuck straws up my nose and covered the last eye, and I freaked out. It scared the hell out of me, and I came jumping out of the thing. I was remembering what you had said. I was scared to death, and it took them 2 hours to talk me back into that chair, and I finally calmed down. Some guy held my hand, and I got through it. I wish I had been wise enough to steal one of them. I really think that would have been fun to, because I used to have a friend that played with Sam Butera, and the Witness was the drummer, and he was the drummer, and he played the drums, with this gorilla head on. And he would do his solo and drumming after that, and then he'd rip off the mask, and there was another gorilla underneath it. I thought I could do that with my face.
So did the other actors follow you around, try to be you?
Not really. I told that story about it, going up to them and saying if I was you and I am. That didn't make them too happy, but they got to work quite often. And there was likewise quite a few gals, just like Britt. Yeah. I wish they'd bring back. I did. If you ever want to see an assistant director turn white, just like snow. I went by him and very seriously said, there's 20 of me on this set, so I expect 20 checks. I thought the guy was going to faint. I didn't get 20 checks.
You were telling us a story about Britt and falling under the weight of the...
Yes, she was really frightened by it. It gets very dark when they give you an avalanche of white painted cornflakes. They're very light.
G'day, ladies and gentlemen. Your cruise director Skip here, and we certainly hope you had a...
Careful with the next question. Somebody get shot?
No, disc is loading.
Moving right home? Yeah. I just wanted to get a plug in for my, what I probably really should have done. I should have been a physical educator all my life, but I sure had 50 years of fun. My dad was Dr. Ben Miller at UCLA, and he was on President Kennedy's and President Eisenhower's Council for Youth Fitness. And I wrote a book about fitness and our problem with our children getting diabetes now. It's called Toxic Waste, W-A-I-S-T. Get to know sweat. They are getting this kind of exercise now and never go outside. You never get any physical education taught to them at schools because we've eliminated it for some reason or other, our government, state by state. And it's just a wake-up call. And when we autograph a few things, if you care to, you can get these books tomorrow as well. This is my autobiography. Didn't you used to be, what's his name?
Great title.
I get that lately. And it's got fun. One time when we were shooting Tarzan, the big doors where they bring in trees and partitions and walls and all that stuff opened up. Everybody stopped doing what they were doing, and in comes a stretch limo with 20 of the biggest California Highway Patrol guys I've ever seen. They were all taller than I am, and as big or bigger. And out steps King Hussein, and he wanted to see Tarzan being shot.
Oh.
And we got to shake hands and get his autograph. Told him he was the real king, and I was only a king of bamboo up in the tree. Anyway, this has, I really have been fortunate to work off and on. I don't know how many of us are between jobs, a lot. But I've done, these are the lists of episodic TV and the films. And then for some reason or other, I've been very, very fortunate in the commercial end of the business. I was the Brownie paper towel giant for 10 years. They just wanted me for my body. And then Gordon's for 14 years. And for some reason or other, I think somebody thought, casting person, just because my last name was Miller, that I had some connection with Miller Beer because I've done 4 of those. But I have no connection, damn it. Anyway, and one of the great successes of any actor is their agent. We consider them the necessary evil, and they consider us the same. They think we get 90% of their income, and we think 10% is too much for them. There's a statement in Hollywood that changing agents in Hollywood is just like changing deck chairs on the Titanic. You're gonna sink anyway. But mine is unusual in several ways, and one of them is that in his youth he was one of few Americans that made a living as a bullfighter, a toreador, in Spain. His name is David Moss. His parents used to have the Toreador restaurant on Pico out in West LA. And to deal with all the BS, get a bullfighter. He stepped through it.
I've got one last question.
Sure.
All the Arctic gear that you wore in that episode, they get quite hot.
Yes. It's not near as hot as the yellow slicker for Gordon's. But, when you put masks on and wigs, and but I would much prefer the Galactica outfit to any yellow slicker. I've lost as much as 10 or 15 pounds in one day. It was very warm, and they have marvelous sprays now that you can spray on the windshield of a ship, and it turns into ice. It's not really ice; it just looks like ice. And they had to put a fan just off camera and dab me off of the perspiration every time, and I'd look out through these icicles, like I was fighting the elements as my sea captain. When I went on the interview, I forgot to tell him that I got seasick on Lake Michigan on a car ferry once. And thank God that a friend of mine told me about a pill called Marazine. It's like Dramamine, only it doesn't make you sleepy, or it didn't make me as sleepy. So every time I was lucky enough to go out of almost every port in North America with those people. They were good people to work for, and it's a good company. Point of interest, maybe they moved their fleet of ships from the East Coast to the West Coast over 15 years ago, 20 years ago, because it was overfished off Newfoundland and everything, and now they fish off Alaska. Good company. If they ever ask you to work for them, I'll loan you my Mirazine.
Does anybody have any questions for Denny? Go ahead.
Tell everybody about your experience working with Jack Palance.
Jack Palance, I had heard god-awful stories about how he was difficult to work with, just terrible to work with. And I had to do 2 rather involved fights with him. And we were at the LA Athletic Club starting at when it got dark. And the first shot was my double dropping from a water pipe down to the mat below in the gymnasium. And you could hear his leg break all over the place. And from that moment on, I had to do my fight, then I had to do the fight with Jack Palance's double, and then I had to do the sets or the close-ups with Jack. And I was looking forward to it because I had heard he was kind of rough. But he really was a joy to work with, and he was very generous. Gave me some ideas about, I was a lunatic psychotic killer, and I thought that he had been chosen in World War II to kill my character's father because he had been a turncoat. He had been a spy. And he couldn't convince me otherwise. So in the first scene, I'm tying a young, pretty teenager to her own steering wheel. And I tell her, it's not about you. And I get out of the car and the train hits her. And then I get mean. It was a very interesting part, but I've always been proud of being killed by Dracula. I died very well. I died many times, over and over. Because of my size, I was bigger than those people that killed me, and so the star looked pretty impressive. I'll tell you something, Terry Thompson. I worked with Sidney Poitier in his first job as a director. It was a Western called Buck and the Preacher with Sidney Poitier. Harry Belafonte, yes. And I played a redneck, and I was getting in an argument with this white sheriff who wasn't being mean enough to the blacks to turn them back around and go back and pick cotton. We rehearsed it on the top of some mountain in Durango, Mexico, several times. And I looked over for an okay from Sydney, and he went like that and turned and walked away into the rocks. And I followed him. And Sydney must be 6'3", or was at that time. I was 6'4" at that time. I'm not sure. I'm not near that tall now. And he got right up, and he had cowboy boots. So he's right eye to eye with me. And very quietly he said, "I just don't believe you hate us niggers enough." And walked away. And I went, he's going to be a good director. He is really going to be good. So you only had to say one sentence and I got the message. Yeah, he was something. He was just such a gentleman.
Ladies and gentlemen, Denny Miller.
Though actor Austin Stoker did not appear on Battlestar Galactica, he is no stranger to the science fiction genre. He starred in John Carpenter's Assault on Precinct 13. He also has the distinction of playing McDonald, the human leader in the 20th Century Fox film Battle for the Planet of the Apes. Being a longtime friend of Terry Carter, Austin gave the fans the opportunity to find out what it was like to work on a film like Planet of the Apes, as well as some of his other projects. Austin, take her away.
Coming along in the 50s and even the 60s. But that was how it all began.
Okay. So anybody have any questions for us? Go ahead.
Your involvement with the Planet of the Apes franchise, and that was known for its kind of social commentary.
Yes.
What was it like to be involved in something like that? And were you aware of it going in the project?
No,
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, okay. What was it like to be involved in the Planet of the Apes franchise? I didn't even know it was, I didn't look at it as a franchise. I knew that there were other films before I did. The one that I did was number 5, Battle for the Planet of the Apes. And I have not seen any of the movies. And I got a call for an audition for that particular one. And they screened the previous one, I think it was Conquest. Yeah. And they screened that for me at the studio, so I was able to see what the story was about, where it came from, where it was going. And I went in an audition and got the part. There were about 7 other actors who were there for the same role. And after I auditioned and was leaving, the director said to me, "Can you come back in 45 minutes?" I said, "Yes." I don't stay around, leave. This is at Fox Studio in LA, and come back in 45. And when I came back, there were no other actors there, and I thought, "Oh, man, something is up here. What's going on? Are they going to give me this role?" I guess. And they did. And that's how I got it. And the director said that the role I was playing was the surviving brother of the other actor who played the lieutenant governor. And his character was killed in the previous episode, and I was going to take over his job. And he said we have the same voice quality and some sort of a resemblance, and that's how I got it. Yes.
Austin, the movie had a lot of pyrotechnics in it. Anybody come close to getting hurt, or was safety first and foremost?
No, not really. There was only one incident where the kid had to fall out of a tree, and they were concerned about that. But no, nothing happened. Nothing happened.
I mean, there's a lot of good explosions in that movie, and it's just amazing.
No, there were no incidents of anybody being hurt in any way.
You have a question?
Yes.
Tell everybody your experiences about meeting Sammy Davis Jr.
Sammy Davis Jr.
Oh, it's Sammy Davis Jr. Oh.
Can you repeat the question for these people?
Yes. My experience meeting Sammy Davis Jr. I met Sammy Davis through a friend of mine, a mutual friend of ours named Albert Popwell, was an actor, and he and Sandy were very close friends. And I met Sandy through him, and then I was in Las Vegas doing a stage production of a play called The Boys in the Band. And Sandy was a very friendly, very generous man, and he would invite us to his suite parties in New York. And my wife at the time, who was also an actress, she passed on, she died in 2004, we'd been divorced and everything. And she also knew Sandy. And he would say, where did you find this guy? Where did you find this ugly guy? And he always called me ugly. Just, kidding. But he was generous to a fault. Don't say anything around him that you needed, unless you intend him to give it to you, you're going to give it to you, whatever. You need a suit, come here. I'm going to give you whatever it is. He was like that. And the point of the story is that I'm a Frank Sinatra nut. When Frank Sinatra died, my wife I was in tears. She said, he loves Frank, well, he loves me. And I got to see Frank Sinatra in person at the Fontainebleau in Miami many, many years ago through Sammy. I was down there performing at a show at the Carnival Hotel. I went to see Sammy and I said, I'd love to see Frank. Want to see Frank's show? And he called one of his buddies, I'll give you to see the show, take him over to Frank's. And that was it. And I went to see Sammy, went to see Frank Sinatra. That's kind of the guy that Sammy gave us.
Wow.
And Harry was telling me that his book, was it called?
Yes, I Can.
Yes, I Can is an incredible,
wonderful book,
which I haven't read. I have the book that looks about this thick. Now I'm going to read it. But that's my Sammy Davis book.
Time for one more question.
Super guy.
I wonder if you could tell me, what do you think is the number one thing that a young aspiring actor should know about going into the business?
But going into the business, don't expect success.
What should you expect?
A lot of work, a lot of hard work, and really probably think of some way to get out of it.
Now we come to a special segment of the show. On February 27th, 2011, the Galactica family lost a very dear member. I am speaking of Robert Firo. Bob will be deeply missed, and his wit and his wisdom are well appreciated by all of the people who partook in the Galactica cruise. Here now are segments from what we believe to be the last interview given by Bob, which was taken aboard the Galacticruise.
Your hand didn't give you much of a chance of facial expressions, did it?
Not a great deal. No, you had to try and I guess I can liken it to what was the Richard Fleischer picture? The Planet of the Apes, where all the actors were so dependent on that, communicating with their eye, what they meant with their eyes. So that was a challenge. But there was nothing nearly as complex emotion as you'd see in Planet of the Apes. It was just, I am brilliant, and I'm going to kill you. So,
Blood trail.
Yeah, right, the blood trail.
You give a pretty good imitation of Lance Legault when talking about the blood hunt.
Well, the blood hunt, yes. Well, Lance's voice is only slightly deeper than mine. But since my illness, my voice is kind of not what it used to be. But anyway, that's history.
Okay. In the episode The Man with Nine Lives, Tava pulls his bolo out early, and ended up bringing shame to the Nomen, especially Maga. It seemed like it was left to Bora to end up taking charge and to discipline Tava. Were they brothers? Were they some sort of hierarchy?
I believe, well, as I was Terrence and I were talking about that, and there was really no backstory for really coming in my mind. And as a matter of fact, Lance and I didn't talk about it either. But it seemed to me that it was a samurai kind of thing. It's the honor, and you had to earn respect. So if you screwed up like that, throwing an unwarranted,
Tava was your kinsman. Magat said that Tava was your kinsman.
Well, I took that to mean, really, well, I vaguely remember that now. Yeah, I guess that, yeah, so he was, I don't know, distant cousin? I don't know.
Just kidding.
I really
It was your
don't
fault
know.
that you had to take care of him.
As I said, there was no, yeah, like, I don't know. There wasn't a backstory to it. I don't know. I didn't claim him as my brother.
It was like a master and a power.
You came back in a later episode, Baltar's Escape. Did you know at the time that you shot the first episode that they were going to ask you to come back for the second episode?
No, but I was happy as a clam to do that because as an actor, to do back-to-back episodes on anything, especially the most expensive hour on television at the time, and every episode went at least 3 to 4 days over schedule, plus a lot of OT. I was making some good coin. So back in 78, well, 78.
You got to work with Fred Astaire.
Indeed, I did.
You said that you had more of a story to tell me.
Oh, no, actually, it had to do with the question that I asked Terrence earlier, having to do with that story about how he came to be on that show, and that was that his grandkids. The story I heard was maybe George knows more about it. His grandkids said, "Granddad, we want to see you on Battlestar Galactica." And so Fred called up Lou Wasserman, said, "What can you do for me?" So I don't know who wrote that script exactly. Oh, Don did? Yeah. Sounds good to me.
I'm going to tell something that I don't think most people here know. You dated Anne Lockhart's sister.
June Jr. Real, just as sweet as Annie. Real sweet gal. Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Robert?
Not Battlestar Galactica related, I'm sorry, but why don't you tell everybody about your favorite role doing Shakespeare?
Oh, my favorite role, Shakespeare. My goodness. Oh gosh, I haven't really. I've done 17 Shakespearean plays. I never got to do Hamlet, never got to do Lear, so those are out. Never got to do those big title roles, but I played Oberon in Midsummer Night's Dream. That was a blast. And doubled as Theseus, the king, so there was a costume change, and I had to deal with a horse because we were working out, outside in an amphitheater, an outside amphitheater, Marin County, California, if you all know it. Beautiful theater, Dominican call it. And I did 7 consecutive repertory seasons out there in Marin's. I almost said it. Snakeship Festival. No. Shakespeare Festival. I think one of my favorite roles was actually playing Lorenzo in Merchant of Venice, 1965. I was just a kid, and it was my first role. No, second role. My first role was also a Commedia, but the same theater. In Palo Alto, California, we had a semi-professional season in which I got to play with John Carradine. This was 1965. Dear old John. And in 1965, John was 65. And he played Shylock, I played Lorenzo. And, the fun we had. And the stories that John used to tell. At least once a week, he'd set his dressing room on fire. Because he made his own prostheses, his own false noses. He'd cure them in formaldehyde. And he'd say, Robert, you see these slippers here? They had EB on the toe, embroidered on the toe. The EB, he says, you see these slippers? These were given to me by Edwin Booth. Might have been a thing. I don't know, but just as a theatrical experience, Sylvia Sidney, Brock Peters, John Carradine. Oh my goodness! I mean, for a youngster, that was pretty heady stuff, and that was fun.
Anybody else?
Robert, you told me the story, and I was pretty amazed about, you got to play one of the baddest guys in the Dirty Harry film, and you never got credit for it.
Yeah, they never gave me screen credit for it, which pisses me to this day. Yeah, Magnum Force. Which, in my estimation, was the best of the bunch. Not because I was in it, because I got killed off early by Clint moving away with his 44. The world's largest handgun. Yeah, so.
That's how they opened the movie, with that phrase, and just a hand holding the 44.
Yeah.
The evening was coming to a close, and everyone enjoyed a fine dinner in the Paradise's Elation dining room. The following morning, Wednesday, September 17th, 2008, the 30th anniversary of the premiere broadcast of Battlestar Galactica. On that day, Sean O'Donnell had something special planned for the fans. The celebrities were willing to give one-on-one time with the fans. Things kicked off with the always entertaining George Murdoch, who played Dr. Sillick on the broadcast. Let's listen in on some of George's session.
Through pretty much any of your shows, but with particular emphasis on Battlestar, were you able to keep anything when they canceled the show, or do you wish there was anything you would have gotten?
No.
No, I mean, in those days, depending on the show, but this is a very specific, very special production. They had very specific costumes. It wasn't as if, like, some shows, you say, the wardrobe man would say, man, I sure did like that suit. Or I sure did like that. You could buy the suit, or if they really liked you, they'd give it to you. I remember Barney Miller, when we ended the show, I got my suit, my hat, and I got the men's room signed.
No.
That set, I understand, is in the Smithsonian. I don't know. But no, you didn't take things. If it was special in your life, you could use them. What the hell do you want it for? You know?
Somebody's hand over there. Or...
What?
Oh, here.
Were there any scenes that you particularly remember that you really liked in Battlestar Galactica? Perhaps were cut from the episode that never made it, and I feel describe for us.
Well, there's always footage. That meaning exposure, meaning my take. It was on me. The camera was on me. That no matter what role you're doing, and there is a perfect example, they were more interested in seeing Richard or Dirk or whoever, the ladies, you know. Mm-hmm. I didn't count that much. I mean, I had lines, I was perhaps the main figure of the scene, I got exposure, but when it came to coverage and print and release, or to be seen from the air, the close-ups mainly went to the big guys. That's just the way it is. You know that.
Well, I, for one, like seeing you.
Oh, bless your heart, girl. Thank you. I like being seen. That's my problem. And I'll tell you, one of the worst things in the world that can happen to somebody. They're in a play or whatever, maybe you're in a comedy and you gotta laugh. It's the most seductive thing in the world. It's like a disease. It's an infection. It's the most insidious thing in the world. It's like sex. It's just, you never get enough. Just laugh. You don't know how to get these things. I remember one time working a couple of shows in plays. I got these laughs on. Where the hell did they come? What did I do? I didn't even know it. You know, and I still don't know sometimes. You don't know sometimes what is funny and what isn't. But there's a saying about on a gravestone, when somebody died, I don't remember what it was. Dying was easy. Comedy was hard. It's true. It's true. Drama, forgiving. My God, you can fret, cry, and laugh and joke and whatever, wrong all over the place, kill, whatever. Comedy, it either works or it doesn't. That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
George,
Yes.
while I'm Barney Miller, did you guys ever run into a situation while you're doing a scene and for some reason all of a sudden the giggles start and it's almost impossible to do the scene because you start looking at each other and everybody?
Almost every comedy.
I mean, I could see that with Barney Miller, especially with your character, you know, being the internal affairs guy, and you're supposed to be serious, and those guys, you know, with you, with the comic going back and forth, I just think it had to be impossible almost to keep straight, you know?
It happened, yeah. Specific instances, I can't remember any outstanding specific moment.
But it was kind of a regular thing, especially in the comedy shows? Was it somewhat of a regular thing on the comedy shows that you did?
Well, it doesn't happen regularly, but it does happen a lot.
Okay.
And there are times where you just have to almost shut the set down because they can't recover. They can't. You walk into the set, you look at somebody, you start laughing. The scene is that good.
The giggle loop.
Yeah. Somebody is that funny. I mean, there are people that are funny people. God, we shut up. I'm seriously, there are people that you just walk up and say hi, and you want to giggle. It's a pleasing. It's a. Stunning. You look at a woman, man, that's it. But it's somebody just provokes laughter or a smile. And it's the most wonderful feeling in the world. I envy it. My God, I envy it. But some people have it. Yeah.
The actor, I'm Barney Miller, the actor who played the gay man, I can't think of his name. He was absolutely brilliant on that show.
Oh, I can't think of his name offhand, but that guy suffered so badly as a result of doing such brilliant work.
He was terrific on it.
Yeah. he couldn't get a job after Carnival.
Really?
Because everyone thought he was a homosexual. Yeah. And he changed his name.
Right? Even kids ago.
And finally did a few jobs, but he never recovered from that. That's terrible.
He was absolutely brilliant.
But I mean, it's like there are so many actors. There was a time when actors, real actors, they came from the stage, from the theater. England, wherever. Their whole entire life had been spent on the stage. And they had backgrounds and all kinds of roles. They did a movie like Bela Lugosi did, you know, or Boris Karloff. They did these freaky guys. And they were slotted typecast. And they virtually never did virtually anything else. And they were wonderful actors, gifted. This guy, I knew it. And he, I cannot think of his name. He changed his name. Had to change his name. Well, he did change his name.
He was the star of the whole show. What? He stole the whole show. Or
yeah.
He was just, how we were, you can see the reaction in his voice.
Frank Gorshin. Anybody remember Frank Gorshin?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I had the opportunity. I had the opportunity to meet him in Vaughn's Market in California one day. He was shopping, and I'm the biggest fan in the world. I'm just drool over people that I like, admire, respect, whatever, especially actors. And I walked up and said, "Mr. Gorshin, I just want you to know what pleasure, et cetera, et cetera." I did, and hey man, it's cool. Thanks, I appreciate it. And then a short time later, I saw him do a Broadway production of a thing called Good Night, Gracie. And well, his brilliance at impersonations were flat out, hands down, the best I've ever seen.
He was fantastic.
He put everyone to shame.
I saw him do Man of La Mancha in Chicago.
Really?
He was fantastic. Yeah, it was a Democratic fundraiser, and he came on stage, and he was just brilliant.
One of my favorite plays and productions. What's his name? The originator of it. The guy who originated the role.
Burton? Richard Burton?
No. Richard Kiley.
Kiley.
Yeah, Richard Kiley. Oh my goodness. What a production. And the girl who played Dulcinea.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, yeah. Well, but he was an actor. You know, here's this guy who could do all these crazy frenetic impersonations and whatever else, comedy. And there he is doing it.
Yep.
Watch it. Yeah.
Singing at full lung capacity. He was just fantastic.
I just missed seeing one of the most wonderful. Anybody see Chorus Line? I mean, I'm talking about stage production. I was never a musical fan, and I heard about the Chorus Line being successful. I mean, being well received. And so I was in San Francisco doing a job, and so I went over to see Chorus Line one night, and I fell apart. You didn't know whether you were going to laugh or cry or whatever, especially if you were in this business. But it was applicable to life. And if you ever get a chance to see a good production of that play, see it. Because, that musical, because it is so fantastic. Saw it 5 times. Yeah. Took people to see it.
Thursday, September 18th, the last day of the cruise. And what better way to start things off than with back-to-back presentations by actor Richard Hatch. The first segment is an insight into his acting workshops, which he calls Richard Hatch, Acting from the Heart.
Consistently, I started out and I was 20 years old and I went to an acting class because somebody told me that I needed to go there because it could help me. And I was the shyest, most insecure kid on the face of the world, okay? I couldn't make eye contact with anybody. And somebody said this would help me. And I went to the class and it had a sign over the door that said, no acting, please. And I thought, here's an acting class with a sign that says no acting, please. And when I walked into the class, they had people like Jack Nicholson and other people in this class, believe it or not. And they were doing all these exercises, getting up front of the room, you know, kind of doing all these strange little funny exercises, expressing whatever they were feeling in the moment, an exercise called I Feel, I Want, I Need, I Am, you know, and somebody would be singing a song like Happy Birthday really slow, and then the teacher would be throwing out these imaginary things like somebody that you really love is standing behind you. Your worst enemy is over in the corner, you know, and you have to let out whatever you feel through the song. There's all these exercises that really, believe it or not, helped you to get more comfortable being up in front of the room, not being so self-conscious, and learning how to deal with fear and all the things that stop most people. So for me, it wasn't even about being an actor. It was about I was getting the chance to really learn how to overcome all my inhibitions. To get to a point, and I hate to say it, most of us are afraid to say what we feel. We're afraid to stand up for ourselves. We're afraid to really communicate what's really going on with us. And half the problems in the world come from bad communication. So here I am learning how to communicate, learning how to listen to what I'm feeling, learning how to communicate, learning how to make eye contact with everybody in the room. And by the way, I teach seminars for public speakers or anybody that wants to learn how to communicate in a more powerful way. I do lots of seminars like that. I can do Tony Robbins type stuff, kind of empowering people, helping people to kind of step out of whatever is holding you back, get out because I can. My favorite venue, I have to say the stage has been an amazing experience for me because a live experience of getting up on a stage, feeling the adrenaline rush, stepping out in front of an audience for the first time. I tell you, it's that you want to be anywhere but there in that moment because your fear that they're not going to like you is so great. And every actor goes through that.
Last night I dreamt a dream of better days with you and I. Let moments of happiness shine so bright. I woke with a smile, alright. Don't walk away to see it by any other name. Don't walk away. Is it time to just say goodbye? You speak to me in broken words and whispers that sing like little birds. You open the book with scars on the cover. We'll see the truth that lies beneath. Don't walk away to see it by any other name. Don't walk away. Is it time to just say goodbye? you.